Welcome to the Positive Partnerships webinar series. Today's webinar is an information session on managing transitions. I'd like to start this webinar by introducing myself. My name is Rachel Dillon and I'm the Delivery Team Leader for Queensland. I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar from wherever you may be logging or dialing in from. During the course of this webinar, my intention is to cover these areas: exploring transitions, both daily and lifelong transitions, preparing for change, and some sharing of ideas, strategies, and resources. I'd like you to now think for a moment, what's your intention today? How can you best use this time during the webinar? Whilst you're thinking about this, I'd also like you to remember the most important thing of all. It is you who is the expert. Parents are the people who know far more about their children than anyone else. So today, I'd like you to sit comfortably, create a safe, quiet space for yourself where you will not be interrupted. I'd like you to think of yourself in a container or a vessel where you're going to fill it up with ideas, new thoughts, and discoveries. If you end up taking away one new idea or thought today, then we've succeeded here. I'd like to just remind you that you may feel emotional listening to some of the information, or you may not. You may not even begin to process your feelings or learnings until sometime after this webinar, and that's okay too. Please feel free to email or call the Parent Carer line for support or if you want to talk through something. But more importantly, we'd like you to think about who is in your own network of support. Who might you be able to draw on to download or debrief with regarding the information from this webinar? One thing that you should definitely not take away with you today is self-doubt. You are a force for good. You are doing and have been doing the best job that you possibly can with all of the knowledge and information you have at the time. The dictionary definition for transitions is that transition is the passage from one position, state, or stage, etc., to another. So why then might transitions be difficult for our young children on the autism spectrum? Why are they difficult and stressful? For our children with ASD, this passage between states and stages could represent a myriad of changes throughout the day, the week, the month, the term, or the year. Each child will cope with transitions in a different way. Some transitions will require more detailed planning than others. What we do know is that difficulties coping with transitions and changes are very common among children with autism. Some of the reasons why transitions could be difficult for these children is that they're often having rigid and repetitive behaviours and thoughts. They often require longer processing time for visual and verbal information. They often miss verbal and social cues that we take for granted. So verbal and social cues for change or direction. Some children naturally experience higher levels of anxiety. And some children on the autism spectrum have difficulties with general communication and therefore don't understand when changes are occurring. So what transitions do our children encounter on a daily basis that could cause concern or anxiety? And when thinking about these transitions, we might like to start thinking how we could cater for them. Stopping one activity to start another. Bedtime. Home to school and school to home. Having visitors. A relief teacher or any change to class routine. Moving from one classroom to the next. Bell time. Changes to TV programs. Or changes to their own body or health of a family member. These are what we call daily transitions. What might be some of the larger scale transitions that can potentially cause stress, anxiety or difficulties for our children on the autism spectrum? A new sibling, moving house, changing school, primary to high school, divorce or separation, changing class or grade level, car to bus or bike to school, prep to primary, perhaps a new room or sharing a room with a sibling, puberty itself. And let's not forget here to understand that some of these transitions can cause anxiety for all children, not just children on the autism spectrum. Birth, death, or illness in the family. Transition from school to work life. Perhaps you can think of many more transitions your children might encounter through their lifetime, or many more daily transitions. You might like to write some of them down so that you can be prepared when beginning to think about supporting those transitions. When we talk about supporting transitions or managing transitions, we often use the phrase transition planning. So why is transition planning so important? There are a number of questions that need to be asked to assist in transition planning. The answers to who, what, when, where, and why questions will help you with the planning process. If these questions can be answered clearly and directly for children before a transition occurs, this will help ease the anxiety. Transition plans also need to be tailored to the individual, and no two plans will ever be the same, just as no two children on the autism spectrum are ever the same. To coin a phrase, if you know one child on the autism spectrum, congratulations, you know one child on the autism spectrum. So plans for each child will vary in strategies and lengths. There is evidence to suggest that people with ASD respond better to transition and change when it is supported by a planning process with involvement from key stakeholders. Because children with autism often require extra time to process information, forewarning definitely helps, as do autism-specific supports, such as visuals. A level of forewarning and planning for changes required by individuals with autism vary from one person to the next. We're going to break for a moment now, and you can sit back and relax and watch a short video clip. Because we often find technology today really influences a lot of our children, and particularly our children with ASD, Getting them off and on computers at the right times and transitioning between activities can prove a real challenge. So Barbara Lester, who is a licensed clinical social worker, has provided us with a short video clip of strategies to help children and teenagers with an ASD transition.
Hi, my name is Barbara Lester, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in working with individuals and families affected by autism spectrum disorders. And today I'm responding to a comment from a viewer who asked for some suggestions about helping children and teens transition from one activity to another, and specifically from video games to some other activity that they need to do. So let me share with you a few ideas about this, and I'd also welcome any comments from other viewers on this video, because I'm sure that a lot of you out there have some good suggestions you could share with each other. So one of the things that I suggest is that families who have someone in the family affected by an autism spectrum disorder do need to do what they can to minimize some of the transitions. So that means, you're not going to be doing a lot of different running around kinds of activities and chores throughout the day. You might plan one or two things, but that would be better than saying, oh, let's run here, let's run here, let's run here, and let's run here. Because for a child or teenager on the autism spectrum, that could be extremely stressful. So I'm not trying to suggest that you have no transitions, because I don't think that's helpful or doing anyone any favors either in the long run, but just to keep a middle path, have some transitions with a somewhat gentle pace to the day whenever possible. Probably most of you are well aware of the fact that children on autism spectrum are going to do better with warnings about, and this is what we're going to be doing today, or this is what we're going to be doing in 10 minutes, and 5, and now we're at 2, and now it's about time to go. And another way to help them and to provide those kinds of warnings is to use your visual schedule if you're not already doing one. I like to use a whiteboard, you can use a piece of paper, you can use pictures, depending on whether the child is reading words or not, where you're putting a list in a way of what's going to happen throughout the day, and to be showing both the preferred activities, like the time when the child's getting time to do the things that they want to do, as well as the non-preferred activities, such as maybe a chore or an errand that needs to get done, where they're going to need to stop a preferred activity to do a non-preferred activity. Now, another thing to keep in mind is you might use as your warning system, you might use a timer, you might use one that's got a buzzer, you might use, I really like the time timer. If you don't have one already, it shows elapsed time. So you turn something on a dial, and then this big red block comes up that shows, say, 45 minutes, and then the red shrinks down until the red is completely gone, and when the red is all gone, you're now at 0. So they can really see the time counting down in a way that can be helpful for a lot of children on the spectrum. Even better, for things like video games or computers, if you could set up a system, and some things like this can be purchased, where maybe they have earned through their reward system a certain amount of gaming time, let's say it's half an hour, and you've entered in some kind of code or time amount onto the system that you've hooked up to your console, and then when the time's up, they just get booted off the game or off the computer. It can help make it not quite as personal as that you're telling them they have to get off it. I know there's programs like that for the computer where they can earn, say, a certain amount of computer time. You give them a password. It gives them 30 minutes or however much time you've allowed of game time, and then it gradually, it gives them warnings, and then eventually just kicks them off it. And so speaking of that, in terms of earning it, just keep in mind that you want to have a good reward system set up. Perhaps they're earning their time to do their preferred activities, and part of this, their goals for their reward system might be that they transition well from one activity to another. So that might be a behavior goal that they're working on, such as when I give you a warning, you need to end it by the time period that I've given you, and move on to the next activity, and maybe they're earning a reward for doing that, because we're acknowledging that that's something really hard. And it's hard for many of us, but it's especially hard for someone on the autism spectrum. And I encourage you to look at one of the other videos I did on the use of structure, and think about how you can build this into the structure you're already setting in place. So thanks everyone for stopping by today to listen to this, and I encourage you, as I said before, to leave comments about ways that you handle transitions so that we can share that information with each other. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to have more of these kinds of videos. My YouTube channel is ASD Specialist, and hope to see you here again sometime.
So Barbara talked about a few tips for any parents that may be having difficulties with transitioning from gaming or computer time. I especially liked the idea of having a timer. You can Google a lot of the resources she was talking about, particularly the time timer, for anyone that's interested in having a time timer accessed on their computers. Moving on now to preparing for change. How can we prepare and plan for change? What might that look like? Well, firstly, we need to teach. We can't take for granted that all children know what change is about. So teaching your child about change. For instance, change is a bit scary, but it's okay. Change can be a good thing. Focusing on the positives of change. Look at a butterfly. A chrysalis turns into a beautiful butterfly. There are plenty of books and resources that you can access to teach about change itself. Provide supports for change. For example, visuals, visual routines, sequences, social scripts, etc. Practice or role play. Practicing change when your child is relaxed and calm is the best time to practice transitioning. Role playing with family members to teach strategies to cope with change appropriately. Example, what could we do when we're not feeling calm? Is there a safe place we can practice going to? Are there safe practices we can use to calm ourselves down? Reinforce appropriate responses to change. What we reinforce and praise, we get more of. And probably one of the ones I find most important that parents often forget to do is highlighting what will stay the same. For example, okay, Tom, you're moving class next year, but you have John and Jack in your class, just like you do this year. Or, Mum's still going to be picking you up every afternoon. So highlighting what things stay the same, perhaps it's where the toilets are, the library, the canteen, the way to get to school, so that children can then focus on the things that are the same rather than the one thing that is changing or the big thing that is changing. Good practice for responding to transitions at school is accessing all the information you can first. Ask schools to give you some warning if possible when change is going to occur. Ask lots of questions. Develop a plan. Perhaps meet with your child's teacher or as a family to develop a plan together to support the transition. Ask what is required, by whom and when. Remember the transition needs of each child is different. Perhaps together with your teacher you could use a growth model to support your planning. Perhaps you could offer to help create visual supports and sequences or social scripts or sensory supports. And offer to come back to evaluate and review. Was the transition support plan effective? What could have been done better for next time? Here is an example of using the growth tool. For anyone that has been to a parent carer workshop, you will have experienced the growth tool in the workshop itself. If you'd like to know more about the growth tool, please log on to our learning portal where you can find a whole module on the growth tool. Our G is our goal, and for this child, Gabrielle, it's not coping with change at all, and she tends to run away. So the R is for reality. What is actually really happening at the moment? Gabrielle has limited understanding of the language of others and can only say a few words. Gabrielle loves structure and routine. She likes to know what is happening next and particularly likes the visual timetable at school. She has difficulty understanding time concepts in general. Weekends and holidays are relatively unstructured. Gabrielle loves the swing at school. So these are all the facts. O is for our options, where we brainstorm what possible options there might be. Provide a visual that explains which days at school and which days are for staying home. Give warning of the morning activities the night before by using a timetable story, the following day's events. To explain if it is a school or a home day. Provide structure into the weekend and holidays by using a visual timetable. Continue to lock the door and hide her bag and uniform. Allow her to wear the school uniform and pack her bag and make home more structured like school. Perhaps get a swing at home. Plan regular trips to the park to get the swing on the weekend and every day on the holidays. Lots of options there. Our W is our will. What will we do? Perhaps we'd add structure to the weekend and holidays to minimise the stress of change. Maybe that is the easiest option to go with, or one option we can try for now and maybe review and try another option if that one doesn't work. T is our tactics. What will we put in place? Take photos of school and home to explain what days are school days to give advance notice. Plan weekend and school days so that there is a set routine that mirrors school day. Example, get dressed, go to the park, come home, morning tea, activity, while still allowing some flexibility. Make a visual timetable to explain to Gabrielle what will happen at home on the weekends and holidays. And our habits. What can we do to sustain these tactics and the will for a long time? Talk to school in collaborative planning meeting to identify what support school can put in place to warn Gabrielle of weekends and holidays. Have multiple copies of visuals so that photos needed for the timetable are always available. Or put the sign on the door to remind family and visitors to lock the door. So this is just a fabulous example of one way of mind mapping our strategies. The growth plan can be used for anything, any difficulty or problem behaviour. The other tool which you may have been introduced to at one of our workshops, or perhaps you've done a webinar on the matrix. Here you can see a lot of strategies in the bottom column. Our matrix can also be found on our website, and information on how to fill out the matrix can be found on our website, as can a module on the matrix in the learning portal. We can see here that the strategies for this child, some of them are to do with transitioning. We've got the use of the first then card for communication. We've also got pre-warning before the bell rings and moving in and out of class. And we've allowed this student to colour in his transition visual supports and always have a schedule on the board displayed in the classroom, and using the computer as a reward for completion of non-preferred activities. Visual supports may look different depending on the issues and the child. So here you can see a morning schedule, a social story, a cartoon story, a sequencing card, a couple of sequencing cards, and then a few first and then cards. These are just some examples of visual supports that you might like to try, depending on what transition you're supporting. Using visual timetables, calendars and sequences and social stories can help all children prepare for change. Why not think about creating a story about change together? Example, taking pictures of the new classroom, new school or new home and flipping through that picture book each night until the change actually occurs. If you haven't been onto our learning portal, there is also an online learning module called Managing Everyday Transitions, which could help further your learning if you haven't done it already. It takes approximately 20 minutes. There are many modules on there that might be of interest to you. This is what our website looks like if you haven't been on there already, and you can see in the right-hand corner there are free online courses you can sign up for. Another way of giving and sharing information and asking questions is our Facebook site. It has over 3,000 followers. There's often lots of tips, information and chats regarding the supporting of school-aged children on the autism spectrum. We want this page to offer evidence-based resources about autism, inform people about positive partnership workshops, and to act as a forum for people to share their experiences. We encourage you to leave comments, photos, videos and links here. We do, however, review all posts and will remove anything that we deem offensive or inappropriate. Some other resources which can be found, firstly on our website. There are a couple of documents on the website that might be really useful to you. One is our Managing Everyday Transitions book list, which actually contains a number of books that might be useful depending on the age and stage of your child. There's another great document which can be found on our website, Managing Everyday Transitions Selecting a School. This provides parents with lots of questions to ask when looking for a school, which is a really important process. And here you can see a great website link. This is a Queensland-based document, but is fabulous for all parents. It's called the ASD Online Resource Kit, and it's all about transitioning to primary school, which I think you'll find really useful if your child is at that stage. We've come to the end of today's webinar. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email our Parent Carer line or perhaps use the Facebook site. Or better still, think about who you can tap into in your own network of support. Perhaps you'd like to take a moment to reflect now on something that's resonated with you. What could be the one thing that you're going to do for yourself following this webinar? Or what action could you do that might support your child with transitions? I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. And like I said at the start, if you've taken away one new piece of information or idea or thought, then we've succeeded here today. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.